In the wake of global thermonuclear war, an American submarine finds safe refuge in Australia, only to discover that it's only a matter of time until the last remnant of humanity is wiped out. In the 1959 apocalyptic drama, On the Beach. And that's the movie we're dusting off this week on Movie Bones.
Navy during the war, I got used to the idea that something might happen to me. I might not make it. And I also got used to the idea of my wife and children safe at home. They'd be all right no matter what. But what I didn't reckon with was that in this kind of a monstrous war, something might happen to them, and not to me.
That's Commander Dwight Lionel Towers, played by Gregory Peck, outlining to his potential new love interest the tragic inversion of expectations of a nuclear submarine commander with a family during the Cold War, which, in this alternate history, has gone hot, irradiating and eradicating human life across the entire Northern Hemisphere, leaving Australia as the sole remaining outpost of humanity, at least for a month or so, until the radioactivity has a chance to migrate south of the equator, at which time the remaining pocket of human life will be extinguished. And that, I have to say, at least in its premise format, is kind of what, is what attracted me to, I guess, putting it on the list in the first place. I think you must have done the same, because I think we both saw this independently and both thought of it, because I think we both talked about adding it on, which is why I probably added it on. But something in your notes did strike me. You said this is a divisive film. You're going to love it or hate it. So why don't we start with that? Because it actually proved true in this case. At least, we're kind of separated. Our final verdicts are very separated this week, and that can be interesting. And that's interesting all on its own. You got the heads, and I got the tails. So we'll start with heads. You go ahead with yours.
One thing about Stanley Kramer that we are pretty much assured that we're going to get, or most of the time we're assured we're going to get at this point, it feels like it, is that we're going to get dialogue. There's intermingled things that are happening with the dialogue, like interpersonal situations. And that's what this movie is. It's a lot of dialogue with interpersonal situations. It just happens to be set in a disaster film, which is considered a disaster film.
Basically the end of the world.
It is the end of the world, which I have my own little issues with that, but we'll wait for later on to talk about that.
It is a slow death. Yeah, I will say this. I did appreciate the idea of like a slow but understandable impending deadline. It's kind of like it's a deadline of when the end is coming, but you don't quite know exactly how fast. You have some time to deal with, and so it does make it more interesting than, say, something like a zombie apocalypse where you're facing hordes of violent zombies, or it's like there's an alien invasion movie like an Independence Day, where it's like you're getting buildings blown up and it's a bunch of action stuff. There's none of that here. Like you said, it's all very dialogue heavy, which in itself, I think, at least conceptually, plays to my sense of that could be interesting. Let's see where this goes.
There appears to be nothing that we can do about it, so there's really only one thing we can do about it. And then you've got this like moral, it's not really a moral issue in the movie for the most part, but you get to pick. It's like, how do you want to die? Like, that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Okay, I know, pun intended, maybe, pick your poison. Do you want to be radiation poison, or do you want to be like cyanide poison that's going to just automatically kill you? What I think is good about the movie, I personally like it anyways, is I do like the interpersonal dramas or the interpersonal situations that are going on. It's got like 5 real major characters in this movie, and each of them have their own thing that's happening in their lives, and it does all intertwine because of they're all intertwined in this one way. I think that's a neat premise. I think it's a neat way of doing things. However, I do have like some major critiques of this movie that I will push off to you now, and then we could just start bouncing off each other.
I will join you at least in the meager kind of spoils that I found, for my taste. I will say that there's a little bit that Gregory Peck gives me, in particular in the way he kind of is still talking about his family as if they're alive. His family obviously was back in the States. Everyone north of the equator, apparently, and in fact, in the rest of the world, is assumed to be at this point dead. The radiation poisoning has affected every other part of the world except Australia at this point, and only because of the wind patterns, which will eventually catch up to it. But everyone else is dead, and his family is dead. He knows it is. He hasn't seen them dead, but he understands that they are because of the consequences of this kind of war, as you heard in the opening. So, but to hear him talk about his family, as if they're still alive, and he's holding on not to that the fact that he actually thinks they're dead or that he thinks they're alive, but it's like that he just can't let go. And in those moments, and I wish there was kind of more that was built on top of it, but at least as far as he portrayed that, I like the fact that they at least paid some attention to things like when there's no more oil supply, because well, Australia is not a oil producing country to my knowledge, and so
Yeah.
they're quickly running out of energy options. So a lot of people are like returning to horseback in city streets, and it's like, well, that's pretty cool. I wish there was, that's a nice little attention to detail thing. Again, in a better movie, that would be like the extra icing on top. But that's really the limit of my positive. So yeah, where to start in the part I had problems with? The biggest thing is that there's so much soap opera in this for me. There are characters who have details in their lives. We know that the scientist character, played by Fred Astaire, actually. Weirdly enough, Fred Astaire in a movie like this, I was
Yeah,
not expecting
yeah.
him.
I won't lie to you. Like that actually kind of shocked me. I wouldn't say shocked me, but that got to me a little bit. I was like, huh, that's Fred Astaire. I knew going into the movie he was in the movie, but he was just this grizzled. I'm not saying grizzled. He was very, he's a very somber character.
Yeah, he understands perhaps better than others what's happening and what's going to happen later. And I will say Fred Astaire has some acting ability in him. He has some subtlety to his abilities. But the only thing we kind of really know about him that's that kind of hints at like a past or kind of a yearning. He likes cars, and he's going to spend the remaining of his remaining time indulging in his love of fast cars. And he's got a Ferrari that he's built from scratch, and he's going to go racing in it. And it's a detail, right? And there's other details too. It's
Yeah,
like you have Moira, who she talks about going up and down the Rue de Rivoli and never having done that with French gloves. And it's like, well, that's a detail. None of that really helps me understand her or him. I don't understand their perspectives. I don't understand like what in their
yeah,
past. There's no real there's no perspectives coming from their past. Why this person is different from that person. They're all experiencing the expected kind of no pun intended fallout of grief
yeah.
from this event, but they don't have what feels like a specific take on it that makes it engaging. And so there's no real play
Well,
back and forth between the characters. That was my biggest thing.
yeah. That whole car thing, like it can be jarring if you're not really super paying attention to it. Now, of course, this car stuff, it does, like car stuff. This racing, it does happen like this from time to time. Not like violently like this, but one of the things I was thinking about, we have like how are people adjusting to the society? Oh well, you've got people that are riding on horseback and everything. But you also have a lot of people too that like the jig is up. The race scenes are violent, like in this
Yeah,
movie. And it's not
yeah,
they're trying to like make each other crash. It's just like you have people that are racing without, they're racing without fear because they know they're dead either way. So you get some like really violent car crashes in this movie in the race scenes, and you can attribute that, although the movie doesn't really I don't know if the movie really says like, really brings it up like people just don't care anymore.
yeah.
Or there are some people out there that don't care anymore. But that's what it's trying to point you towards, I think. I mean, I know sometimes you don't have to show, don't tell, but like Kramer, dude, you love dialogue, man. you know?
And I love the dialogue he had in like Judgment at Nuremberg. That's like I'm not counting like it's a mad, 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 mad world. There must be a different writer involved. Like you said, there's a lot of talking in this film. Unlike Judgment at Nuremberg, where as I was riveted to the screen, like both of us were riveted We could not take our
Yeah.
eyes off of what was being going on. And that was a courtroom. That was like a limited space, and oftentimes, even if they did break out of the courtroom, sometimes it's a courtroom drama that has you riveted for a super long for like 3 hours. That's incredible. And then you have a movie like this, which is 2/3 of that length, and yet it felt so much longer to me because the dialogue,
It
it didn't add anything. It didn't
yeah.
crackle. It didn't tell me anything about these characters.
It's certainly a slow burn, like that's for sure. If you're in for it, you're in for it. If you're not in for it, I don't think you're just going to ever really be in for it because,
Yeah,
there are times where it just kind of makes you sit with it yourself. Like it's like, here you go. Here's what they're saying. Here's what's going on. Now you have to deal with it. And
yeah.
it's like, why do I have to deal with it? Well, you decided to watch the movie and you know, we're letting you know this is not going to end pretty. And you're like, that's a bummer.
I will say it's like one of the things that kind of drove me nuts initially too is like I couldn't tell the American characters from the Australian characters because there was
Yeah,
almost
and
practically no difference in dialect at
I
all.
don't think I think it's one of those situations where they sounded more. There were some people that sounded more English. I think that's what we're dealing with. I don't know if there was anybody in this movie that was truly
Oh,
Australian.
there is, and I'll get to that
Um,
too. There is at least one I know for sure, and I'll tell you who he is.
I do have one little kind of funny thing about this movie. This would have just served well as being like a prequel to Mad Max. The rest of the world burns and gets destroyed in Australia because that's where Mad Max is set. It's in Australia. Like it would have just been like the perfect segue. Like this is the prequel to Mad Max, and somehow, but Australia as a whole is like what actually survives
Yeah,
the world, which would have been neat. Like it would have like, how do we rebuild society? I'm not saying okay. I want to make this clear. This part I'm not saying had to go into being Mad Max, but it's like, how do we live? How do we rebuild society when it's quite literally just us now?
and actually, Mad Max is a more interesting kind of post-apocalyptic film than this one is for me. Weirdly enough, and specifically, I like Fury Road the best. I think I really liked Fury Road, but the irony there is, of course, that Australia being kind of renowned, this world-renowned place of being home for like the most deadliest things, it wants to have you dead, is the one place where survival is possible. And it's like that's like one of the ultimate kind of ironies in any kind of dystopian fiction is that kind of thing. But on the subject, going back to a bit to the Australian actor John Milon, Meillon, I think. He's an Australian actor, and you've seen Crocodile Dundee, I presume, and it's
Well, I mean, I I have seen parts of it.
oh, okay. So you have okay.
I
So
mean,
you have
I know what you're talking about.
okay. So you have the character Mick Dundee, played by was it Hogan? I can't think of his first name right now. That was his number one thing. But his best friend in Australia in that movie is played by the guy who plays a character by the name of Swain, Ralph Swain in this movie. This was Jayan's first film. Period. He was in TV a little bit in a couple things, but this is his first proper movie. And he's actually Australian. He's from Melbourne, Australia. And yet he plays a guy from San Francisco. He plays the guy from San Francisco who, when the sub goes to San Francisco to check it out, he bails on the ship and he goes back and he
Oh yeah.
decides that he's an American. The one Australian I could absolutely peg in this movie as Australian, and they make him an American submariner. I'm like, what the heck is that, dude? He has no problem doing an Australian accent. He's from Australia. It comes naturally to him. Why is this film so afraid of Australian accents? You know what I mean? It was crazy to me. It's like, this is the
Yeah.
one guy I know. And Anthony Perkins, obviously, he's not Australian, but I think he was supposed to play an Australian. And
Well,
so
I thought for a little bit that he was a British Navy person,
it's possible. I
but
don't know though. It's
yeah.
hard to know because all the accents were so watered down. I could almost barely pick up on an accent here and there. That it's like there maybe was one in the whole movie that actually kind of edged into it a little bit, but it just didn't feel like it took place in Australia as far as the accents were concerned. That's a thing, and maybe during the time there was other reasons for that. I don't know what it was, but it drove me bonkers because this is supposed to take place in Australia. You know, it's one submarine crew from America and everyone else is Australian. Don't ask me about the rest of it, though. Oh, good grief.
I think one of the things that tripped me up about the whole Cold War thing is that the actual story, like the book itself, doesn't really have to do so much with like the Cold War, which is wild. Like, I mean, I'm sure it was. What I'm saying is, like, I'm sure that it was a basically where it started out was uh, with somebody attacking Italy. The
Hmm.
war began with a nuclear attack by Albany on Italy. Then Egypt attacked Israel with a nuclear weapon, destroying Tel Aviv. Then the United States and United Kingdom attacked Egypt, which sparked a war between NATO and the Soviet Union. And after the Soviets and the China destroyed each other, and then just everyone continuously gets destroyed. You know, I mean, it's all connected, but
I think for someone who's like knowledgeable about that kind of like how things would play out, I would go with someone like I think he's passed away now, but the guy who wrote The Hunt for Red October, what's his name? He's a famous author, Tom
Tom
Clancy.
Clancy. Tom
Tom
Clancy's still
Clancy.
alive. No, he's not. I was wrong. He died in 2013.
Yeah. He was the guy, he actually had like the kind of knowledge you would hope to have if you're going to write, how would this actually happen? In the movie, the characters actually ask the question. It's if Tom Clancy was available, they'd be asking him. Um, and actually, that does bring me to like, one of my other favorite Cold War films is The Hunt for Red October. That's a really good example of a Cold War film. Again, more action oriented, but still a really good one. I think another one that I was going to mention was, is War Games. If you've seen the '80s movie War Games,
Okay, so I have actually seen that movie. It's been a hot minute since I've seen that movie. I think I was in college. But yeah, I've seen that movie.
yeah, that's one of my favorites. It's got one of the all-time classic sum up lines of all time when it comes to the Cold War. Is the only winning move is not to play. It's one of my favorite
Yeah.
lines from these kind of movies. And getting back to the movie, yeah, I think it feels like a missed opportunity to really examine kind of different perspectives that in a slower kind of time frame that you would usually get in a film. But this is a very different kind of film, and I think it's a missed opportunity really overall. So I haven't seen the sequel, or not sure, I should say the remake that from later on. I don't know if I would, given this one. Someone would have to do a really good sight better than this one. Are we ready for final reviews here, or what do you think? Where did you come out on it?
I did think that the interpersonal drama was compelling because once you realize that it's all leading to their deaths, that does kind of make it more intense because you have people that what you see about the people is like they want to be with somebody. Like that's really kind of the ultimate thing is like you want to be with people or you want to be connected to something before you die. And you don't necessarily see everyone die, but it's very much implied. Like, for instance, I'm just going to give this one away. The scientist, he dies with his vehicle. He doesn't crash his vehicle. He
Yeah,
does the other thing you could
carbon
do
monoxide
to take
poisoning.
yourself
Yeah, in the
out.
garage.
Yeah. Um, but that's really kind of what it comes down to is people want to be with who they love or what they love. And I do think that's compelling, because it is that, again, it's just that, it's a slow burn. It's a slow death.
Yeah.
I think the acting is really good in that sense. I don't know. I'm not saying generational performances, but I think you get solid performances out of everybody in the cast. I think in most, you've got a pretty stellar cast,
Yeah.
with all these people in it. There are some things it does go out of its way to show you the world as it's disappeared. Like when you watch those movies out there, think of I Am Legend, the one with Will Smith in it, by the way. You see a world that's just kind of stopped. Everything just suddenly it's what happens if all the people disappeared, and there's not much destruction. Now I will say that like in the book there are scenes from when I found there are scenes where it actually shows destroyed cities.
Yeah.
I do think that would have helped
Oh
seeing
yeah.
that in the movie,
Yeah. San
but I
Francisco is
understand
pretty much
why it's
pristine.
yeah,
It's devoid of human life. It's not devoid of. There's no
yeah,
damage though. That bugged me a bit
yeah.
too.
But for me, where it comes down to is while I do have some issues with the movie, I think it's a trust me. I think if you're a fan of apocalypse type movies, I do think this is a safe one to watch in that sense that it's not the best one in the world by any stretch, but it's a pretty solid film. It's got a book. A lot of people like the book a little bit more. Obviously,
Hmm.
there's a remake of it. Maybe get into that kind of stage. Um, I think there's more under the hood, depending on what you might like. But like I said, the acting is good. The story about them living in the final days of the world, it's compelling. I think also, again, I want to make this clear. I think also go read the book, but I think it's a solid trust me. Watch it once at least,
Okay.
especially if you are a post-apocalyptic or apocalyptic type of person that
Okay.
likes to watch that kind of stuff.
Well, fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, speaking from my own experience, I mean, I felt like the movie really needed to have some kind of that differentiation of background and perspective and understanding who these characters were on a deeper level. If you're going to do a quiet apocalyptic film like this, where it's really about the dialogue and the character, then you really have to go deep on you really have to go deep on the who are these people? What makes them different from each other? What do they bring that's different about this event? And I never quite got that. There was never anything presented to me past the superficial aspects of what their interests were, what their regrets were, which is all nice and well, but I don't understand them any better for it. I needed more, and because of that, it just felt like one of the longest movies I've watched, to be honest with you. Yeah, this is a don't look at it for me. I was just like counting the minutes at times. It felt longer to me than actually, Judgment at Nuremberg did. That flew by, like I said.
Yeah.
This one just I felt all every minute. And they lingered on shots too sometimes. I just like this shot feels like it should be over. Speaking of shots, I just want to squeak in there one more thing. It's that there's this where the canted angles and the turning camera movements kind of worked for Judgment at Nuremberg to hold your attention. Here, they just kind of felt kind of out of place for me. It felt like more gimmicky, and that's situational. I know and maybe it's personal too, but that's the way I felt. Anyway, folks, that's about. I don't have a film picked out for next week because I'm kind of going on vacation a bit. Not, that's a bit of a personal thing. Let's see. What should we do next week? I got to pick one out really quick here.
This is a comedy set in 1936, or it came out in 1936 anyways. A charming secretary stands between a bored millionaire and his bet that he can support himself working for a year without touching his inheritance. The cast of this movie, this is starring some familiar names. I'm not going to read all the names, but some of these names sound very familiar. Cary Grant, obviously, Mary Bryan, Peter Gawthorne, and also John Turnbull. That
I've heard
name
of
sounds
him.
familiar. I don't know why. This is directed by Alfred Zeisler, and we are watching next week The Amazing Adventure, which the title does not sound anything like the movie's synopsis.
Doesn't sound all, it does not sound itself like it's anything special. The synopsis actually is more interesting in the description aspect, which actually made me think, ironically enough, of Brewster's Millions, which is the Richard Pryor film from the 80s, which itself was based on a film from the 40s, I think. So, but less interesting take on it.
The big question, folks, that comes from watching this movie: will The Amazing Adventure turn Justin's feelings about Cary Grant around?
Yeah, I haven't had the best, track record of Cary Grant, really. I think the last time we saw him was in the Hitchcock film, was at North by Northwest, and really, yeah, he's still just kind of like a one-note stereotype to me. So we'll see if this changes him, but and the stereotype itself is not all that interesting to me. We'll see. He's entirely capable of. People are entirely capable of surprising me. It's happened before. So maybe this time will be the one, well, hopefully. In any case, folks, that's our show for today. We'll see you guys next week. And Ryan, I'll see you next week. Okay, man?
See you next week.
All right. See you next week, folks. Bye-bye.
I think it's absolutely preposterous.